everyone! Welcome back to Color Sense with Jen. Glad you made it back and I hope you had an awesome week. This week, as I was musing on what I should color and what I should illustrate for my YouTube channel, I figured I should practice my own drawing skills again if I'm gonna eventually do my own coloring books one day. Now is as good of time as any. So I wanted to illustrate and color something in line with the seasons. And it's really hard to tell what season it is right now. I live in the middle of Nebraska, and one day it's snow, and the next day it's green and springy. So I wanted to do something that has a sense of renewal and bright and cheery and springy. And so this is what I came up with. This sketch came out way more involved than I had originally envisioned. I was just going to go for something quick and simple, and then I ended up with more blank paper than I anticipated and just kept on drawing. Added a little bit of depth, a little bit of perspective, and some more detail. But the pen sketch morphed kind of into this cool fantasy cave / forest, and I liked where it was going, so I just kept continuing. Just did loose pen sketching with just a black ballpoint pen I had around the house. I'm generally kind of a perfectionist, but I tried to just let the drawing and the sketch flow naturally and not worry about perfection. And if I made a mark that I wasn't happy with, I just tried to work it into like a vine or a plant, just trying to flow with it and get some practice. And I had a lot of fun with it, actually. I did some cross hatching for some shadows and to add a little bit of dimension. One thing, just a note, is I remember way back when, my grandma is the one that actually taught me cross-hatching. When I was a little girl, she would always teach us to draw little things like angels or hearts, and she would always draw hearts and do a little bit of a cross-hatch in them for some color and some pattern, and that's where I learned how to cross-hatch. So if you're not familiar with it, hatching is a technique that you can use to do some shading, where an artist just draws kind of little hatch marks or hash marks, little lines close together in order to darken in certain areas. And cross-hatching is going across perpendicular to the lines that you've made. So you're making essentially like little X's to darken in certain areas that would be in the shadows. After I was done with the ink sketch portion of this drawing, I wasn't quite sure which medium I wanted to use to add some color, but I knew I wanted to add color. This is Color Sense after all. And I wanted to branch out a little bit from the colored pencils that I had been using. I like colored pencils because I know how to blend them and they're easier for me to control. And in this little sketch that I did, I wanted to be able to control the medium and the color and also have a little bit of forgiveness with the medium that I chose so that I wouldn't completely mess it up if I accidentally put something down too dark or, did a wrong stroke of a paintbrush or a marker or something. So I ended up compromising and went with watercolor pencils and decided to limit myself to only using 5 colors of my colored pencil set. So I did still use colored pencils, but had the ability to blend them and paint them to get more of a translucent, transparent effect. The brand of watercolored pencils that I ended up going with were Generals, Kimberly, watercolored pencils, and this is not a sponsored ad. It's just for your information if you wanted to know which pencils I was using. I used light blue, French blue, lemon yellow, green, and light green colored pencils. And then I tried to use highlights and lowlights where I could. And actually, when I was using my water and the paintbrush, I actually liked being able to get a little bit of the ink from the ballpoint pen to blend in. I thought it made kind of a neat effect and added a little bit more to the shading. Some people might not like that, might not want it to bleed. It didn't really bleed so much, but it did tint the color of the pigment of the paint that I was using. Now, if you look at a color wheel, the blue, the yellow, and the green all sit next to each other on the color wheel, and that's called an analogous color scheme. So that's kind of what I ended up going with here and using in this picture. Some people are very cognizant of color schemes, other people don't care. But depending on what colors you use, you can add highlights, lowlights. You can make some really nice contrast if you're trying to get very dramatic effects. In this case that we're doing here today, it's more soft and subtle and more smooth, calm transition rather than a really stark contrast like you would do with a complementary color scheme. Now, generally with watercolor, you'd be using watercolor paper, which is definitely more suitable for using water and high moisture materials. I'm on quarantine, so I'm just using what I have at the moment. So that's why my paper is curling up around the edges. After going through several different layers of coloring and painting, I came to a stopping point and said I thought it looked good. Definitely could have gone into way more detail and added a lot more blending of the colors, but for this time I think it looks good, and hope you guys enjoyed this little sketch, and we'll see you next week.